Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Youre.
This is Daryl Ames.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Cole Cuchna.
And you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with Jon Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Perhaps the best chorus of voices we've heard yet on the show.
For sure, the first rolled R.
Oh,
in
yes.
the intro. Yes, that was nice.
Right. And we've had Dominic Santana on the show. We didn't even get a rolled R out of him. Anyway, I want to say that this day for me is one that gives me great satisfaction because one of my heroes in music analysis, let's face it, my hero in music analysis is Dr. Robert Greenberg. He's a veteran of the show. Our listeners know many of your episodes with us. And the person that I would consider the torchbearer of Greenbergian analysis of modern music, the latest generation's best hope at really understanding what is infiltrating their ear holes, Cole Cuchna, who's had an enormous week this week.
Yeah, been a good week.
Yeah, the launch of season 3 of his show, the Dissect podcast, that just launched on Spotify this week. And your first 2 seasons we've talked to at length. Your episode with us just aired this last week. And the week that you've had has been great, but one of the things that you mentioned to us when we were with you was the influence that Dr. Bob has had on you, your show, the Dissect podcast, and your musical development as a student of composition. And we thought that was great because we thought, that's our homeboy. We'll take you to his house. So here we are at his house. Yeah, we're drinking martinis as we always do. That's,
you know it.
Yeah, but Pete and I are doing. You two sissies drinking coffee. So, anyway, I'm going to speak for Pete and say we love both of you guys for the work that you're doing for all of our ear holes. But here we all are. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
You bet.
Very cool.
Where do we begin? We should begin with the fact that you are both familiar with each other's work. Would you think it's accurate, Dr. Bob, that Cole is kind of picking up the torch where you are the primary discusser of literate music in most of our lives? Cole has become the analyzer of hip-hop to make hip-hop and the creation process in hip-hop make sense. And now not just hip-hop, because this season is Frank Ocean.
Yeah.
I'd say the newest and most relevant artists of our time is where Cole is attacking, where you are reaching back into history. Do you think it's an accurate comparison?
I hope so. And because, as you've heard me say 1.5 million different times, the distinctions we make between musical genres are for the most part wasteful and utterly irrelevant. And in order to understand anything, we have to listen over and over again and think about what we're hearing and not just react. I mean, emotional reactions are nice, but we also have to think about what we're hearing, because anyone who creates any kind of art that is of substance has invested something in it that we as listeners don't get at a first shot. And so the more we hear, the more we appreciate, the more alive we are, the more complete the experience becomes. And there's no reason in the world why this process should not be applied to all musics, not just the so-called dead European music.
Yeah. Well, that's what you're doing, Cole.
That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, and I 100% agree with that statement, and that's kind of where I feel like my place in the world has become, is like this, I'm not trying to criticize music, I'm trying to champion it, and I think there's not enough of that, and I think why people really connect with your work and seem to connect with mine is that people love music, and I just feel like I want to help them understand why they love it. And I'm not here to criticize, I'm here to promote and to champion and to help people find more value in music, which I think is what you do as well.
Deepen the experience. Yeah. Our lives are so entrenched in trivialities on a daily basis. And it's so easy, especially given the atmosphere in this country right now, whether we're talking about a political atmosphere or a pop culture atmosphere, to just coast on the surface and never get below the surface of anything. And as human beings, we need to get underneath. We need to see the things that are not that obvious. We need to understand the larger truths. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about, whether we're talking about books or art or music or politics or whatever. We've got to think about what we're doing. And nothing is more life-enhancing than music. Yeah. And so
I think everybody at this table would agree with you.
Yeah, except maybe the martinis. And when the martinis are combined with music, excuse me, you see God. But okay. To understand more deeply, and I really like something else you just said, Cole, because I think it cuts to something I believe in. You're not a critic. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't present music I don't like. Yeah, because I don't want to be in the position of saying, this is trash for these reasons, because one person's trash is another person's gold. And I don't feel like being in the position of putting down something that someone else finds important.
Exactly.
I don't want to go there. It's not my role. It's not my place. No matter what I may or may not know, it's not my right to put down anything. So I just don't talk about the music that doesn't attract me. Yeah. And so I'm not in a critical situation.
Well, I'll take it a step further. I want to say that your analysis of music, both of you, is not just because you've chosen a piece of work that has spoken to you and that you've chosen to speak to the people who have connected with that piece of music as well. But when you have a piece of music in front of you that you go, that's not for me. It's not just out of compassion for not wanting to be critical of that piece of music. It's because that music hasn't genuinely reached in and touched you. So there's a sincere factor in the fact that it's not that you're avoiding that piece of music because you don't want to be critical of it. It's that you're not connected with that piece of music. So it's not to say that you won't at some point get there.
Perhaps, but I would add something to that, because especially in the world of art music, concert music, particularly contemporary, there's a lot of charlatanism out there. Oh, yeah. There's just a lot of crap. There's a lot of people who don't know what they're doing. But you know, for someone who's not familiar with a particular genre or a particular approach, it all sounds the same, more or less. I can see through a piece within about 5 seconds. I'm sure all of us can. And I see no reason to address those issues. You know, the more we say this music is by a charlatan, and a listener is saying, well, I can't tell the difference between the charlatan and the stuff that you're saying is great. Therefore, it must all be charlatans' music. I can do more damage to myself than good by actually addressing these issues. Yeah. So it's not that something has not necessarily resonated with me. Sometimes that's the case. Listen, I'm not a huge fan of Philip Glass. The world loves Philip Glass. One day, I might very well be seized by Philip Glass's music, and I will admit that. It's my shortcoming that keeps me from appreciating his stuff. So there's a case where I would agree with you. It just doesn't resonate with me for whatever my reasons are, my problem. But there's lots of music out there that's just kind of trash. And I won't address it because I don't feel that's my role.
How does it happen? We had Allie Willis on the show, and she wrote Boogie Wonderland, September for Earth, Wind & Fire, Neutron Dance for the Pointer Sisters. And even in her own music, she's like, once she gives it up to the client, they change it or do whatever. They're like, we're taking that bridge out and we're just going to whatever. It might take her years to hear the new version of the song in a way that her ears can handle it. How is it that we're able to accept something later that we couldn't? And then the music, like for me, The Doors is very adolescent music. It's angry young guy music. And it does nothing for me anymore. Can you help me understand that at all?
You know, I can only reflect on my own feelings about certain things. I listen to the early Beatles now that, of course, I adored when I was a kid, and it just sounds like bubblegum. It sounds like 1950s bubblegum.
Well, when I was a kid, I liked bubblegum.
Now, for chewing or for listening?
Both.
Oh, my goodness.
But now I like martinis.
Yummy, yummy, yummy. You got love in your tummy. Yes.
As he holds a cigarello of salami in his hand.
So our tastes mature.
I think one thing is we age through certain things. Mm-hmm. Although if we grew up with them, we still have the nostalgia value. Sure. You know, no matter what happens, those early Beatles songs will still remind me of when I was a kid, and that's a very positive thing for the most part. You're talking about is fascinating, of course, because you're talking about a creator coming to grips with interpretations that go beyond how she heard her own music.
Right.
And
she knows how to write a song because she's in the Songwriter Hall of Fame.
Right.
So she's got a lot to get over when she hears her song in a different way.
But sometimes it sucks hearing people crap with your conception, and that's the nature of the business.
Right.
But there's nothing, and that happens even in the art world too. You know.
Yeah, I was going to say the performance of a great work can be easily misinterpreted if it's in the wrong hands. So.
Exactly, and there everything is scripted. You know, everything is scripted as opposed to a song where half of it is improvisation. But still, there's so many ways to murder a piece of music or just misinterpret.
Yeah.
And it's not even that these people are misinterpreting her songs. They're simply doing them in ways she would not have done them. And I can understand completely her feeling.
Or didn't do them at her pass.
Yeah, that must be really hard for
somebody else to take a pass.
Yeah. That must be really hard for someone like that. Because the variables are so great. I mean, in a performance of concert music, you can simply say to someone, schmuck, follow my tempos.
Yeah,
right? I wrote it down on the paper. Just do what I told you to do.
Right.
But now we're talking about something that's not written on paper, so the implication is you have the freedom to go where you want to go. Yeah. I can see where that would be really hard.
And then the song is a lifetime hit as well. So like they took it and they changed it, and you're like, that's not the song I wrote, but like, thank you. It's super. You've got a lot of ego to get over at that point too.
I guess the only good part of all of that is if it's a lifetime hit and there's a new interpretation that everyone likes, you're going to see a little moolah. Yeah, exactly. Wet my beak, and there's nothing wrong with a wet beak.
So my favorite thing to do at Casa Greenberg, where we're enjoying martinis and charcuterie, is to wash Dr. Bob's balls. Cole, help me out. What has Dr. Bob done for you in terms of your ability to understand your own path as a composer, as a composition student, as a whatever it was you were doing while you were consuming Dr. Bob's content?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know where to start. I think I didn't listen to classical music until I actually heard your courses. And my background was self-taught musician, started playing guitar, wanted to be Jimi Hendrix at 13 years old, playing in bands until I was about 25 is when I went to college for music. And I think the biggest thing I would say is that you provided an entry point into a music that I had no interest in, or I had interest in, but it wasn't anything that I really thought I would fall in love with. And you provided that entry point through your courses, and I think you've done that probably. I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you that, but I think that's, for me, the biggest value of your work was just getting me in the door. Because once you're in, it's just the whole world opens up, and you're just like, wow, this, and there's hundreds of years of it. So then for me, it became, digesting your courses, but then also set me on my own path of discovering music that really just changed the way I thought about music, what was possible in music, what was possible in just creating art. So I think that would be the place that I would start.
You're the third person at this table who's told them that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
I think particularly for me,
I wash
it was
all the balls.
For me, it was like the timing of it. So like I alluded to earlier off mic, was I hit a wall creatively in playing in bands. Essentially, I was writing all the music. I'd write everyone's part in the band, and I would be like, here, let's play this song. And
Cole was doing all the work.
Hasn't changed.
I was about to say, in every band, there's one sucker. I was the sucker too. You're looking. The one person who wanted the quality to be higher.
Yeah.
Here's our common thread, fellas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I hit a wall, and so then education became, because I went to community college for 6 years, just taking classes that I liked, without any kind of degree in mind. And I was like, well, I've always loved music. It's the thing that I want to do. So I'm just going to go to school for music. What I didn't realize, that was like such a naive thought, because I had, I could read FACE on the musical staff, but that was about it. And so I essentially just auditioned for Sacramento State, where I went on my own composition. I played them a piece on piano that I wrote. So I got around the whole like education. I can play piano somewhat decently, so I kind of just faked my way into the program. But then once I got in, I realized how everyone had so much experience. They had, taken lessons, and I just felt like a fish out of water because I was. And so your courses.
Can I get you to press pause on that? Because now I want to go to Dr. Bob
Sure.
and say, when someone says they're going to go to Sac State and get a degree in music, as a Steinway artist, wouldn't some of your advice be like be able to read and write and everything else?
Duh.
So when Cole pulls
I
off
have to say something. Sac State's got a really, really, really fine music
It's
program.
really good.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they still running the new music festival in November?
Yeah.
I was featured on that for years.
Yeah.
When a guy named Gene Savage used to run the program. It's a wonderful program and a first-rate facility. So yes, if someone said, I don't really read music, but I'm going to get into the music program, I would say, I think it's time to take really intense private lessons for a year and then apply.
Yeah.
So that's
This is really like some Frank Abagnale shit.
Yeah, but
You
it
know,
worked.
it's
But
like,
it worked.
I'm going to be a surgeon or an airline pilot. I'm just going to get in the uniform
Yeah.
and walk in and then look around and do
But
what he
but
does.
here's the diff. It was school. It wasn't like you were applying for a job teaching there.
Yeah, exactly.
You were
Yeah.
getting in there to be taught.
Yeah.
You just had a much deeper learning curve
Yeah.
than most, but you managed to survive it.
I did, yeah. And again, this all goes back to your work. Is like, so I was taking these college level music theory courses and everything, and then on the side, I was just binging all of your courses, which really helped. I felt like I really caught up in a very quick amount of time, because the great thing about your courses is that you download them and you can just it's at your own pace. So what would usually have taken years if I was taking these classes week by week took me just 6 months, a year, whatever it was. And by the end, I felt like in a lot of ways I actually became more educated than a lot of people in
That's going to be a question I was gonna
aside
ask,
from
yeah.
the reading music, which is still not really my forte. I can't sight read worth anything still, but the history, the basic theory, like the terminology I wasn't familiar with. So it really fast forwarded my education to where I actually was able to make it through, because those first 2 semesters, man, it was some of the I wouldn't say darkest times, but it was stressful. I mean,
Cloudiest, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I was very seriously considering like dropping out and finding something else.
It seems to me you had 2 things going for you right away. You were 25. You weren't a kid.
Yeah.
So you had life experience, and
Yeah.
you had real, genuine desire. And second of all, obviously, really smart, because most people couldn't have handled that. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, they're just not prepared.
Most people, emotionally and intellectually, couldn't have handled that. And
Emotionally,
you did.
it was definitely tough. The intellectual part I've always loved to learn, so that was like, let's do this. But like the emotional, I mean, the first day I was in concert, like, so it's funny because as a composer, you just get stuck as what's your main instrument, and then you try to do. And mine was piano, so then I got stuck in concert band as my ensemble, mandatory ensemble stuff. So then I had to play percussion. So then I'm just already a fish out of water, and then I have to start playing percussion on the fly, and then read music to play percussion that I didn't really know how to read music. So like literally the first day of band, I was trying to play the bass drum, and the professor stopped the whole class and singled me out of course and was like, let's play your part solo in front
Everyone
of
around you was 8 years younger than you are, and all the little girls are looking like, ew.
and like he's counting
all the
time, and I'm
girls who
trying
can
to bang
sight
on
read.
this bass drum for the life of me, and it was just like I still remember that and just being obviously humiliating. But the bright side was, and as much as it's hard for me to like talk about myself, I ended up graduating on the dean's list. The faculty chose me as like the outstanding student of my graduation class, which I feel like is still my personal biggest accomplishment. Because
Were they aware
to
of your whole you created for yourself to start from? Like,
No, I never really told anyone.
so you got there just on the merit of your just work ethic and everything else. Then
I think work ethic was probably the biggest
and intelligence.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
let's face
clearly,
it.
clearly, yeah.
I tell you guys a great story that you're going to really appreciate. The older guys here might remember. There was a journalist named George Plimpton.
Oh, yeah, right.
He wrote a book called Paper Tiger.
Do you know this story? Okay.
He wrote a book called Paper Tiger, and this is what made him famous, because for a full season, he became a member of the
Lions?
Yeah, the Lions, the Detroit Lions. So Paper Lion, thank you. Paper Lion was the name of the book. He became a member of the Detroit Lions football team as their fourth string quarterback because he had played quarterback in college or something. But really, it was a chance to observe the team up close, to be a member, and that's why he was nothing but a paper lion because he really couldn't play. You know, they put him in, he got smashed, he got kicked, he got this, he went through the practices with them, and he wrote about this. And so this was his formula. He would put himself in professional situations that he had no right to be in, and then write about the experience afterwards. And it's really interesting. I once heard an interview with him, and he was asked, what's the toughest position you have ever been in? I mean, the most difficult. Was it, you know, having to throw a ball in a professional football game? I mean, I guess none of those things. He says, for a week, I was a member of, I think it was the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. Oh, boy. They put me in the percussion section. They put me at bass drum. And they were playing a piece, and he only had to hit one note in the concert. One note, and he had done it in rehearsal. And
completely by accident.
One moment he has to hit the bass drum, and it's in concert, and everyone's listening, and everyone's watching, and he gets to the point, and the conductor points at him, and he says, I turned to ice. I froze. I paralyzed. You know, it wasn't like being on a football field where you're just using your whole body and you can just run. He said, I froze. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was total paralysis. And of course he missed it. And everyone laughed and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But it was playing a freaking bass drum, which was the single most difficult thing he ever said he had to do in his career. And there you have it.
And you had exactly the Plimptonian experience.
You had exactly that experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. You know, in the Army, you march and you march off of the bass drum. And so it's like boom, boom. And it seems like the easiest thing in the world, but you're telling me it's not, so I believe you. And it's just crazy to think that. I don't know
it's
how
the easiest thing in the world when you're just playing a steady cadence of quarter notes for everybody to march to.
And if you've been doing it since you were a
you
kid
can't fuck
the guy actually is in a band who does it. Yeah,
I mean, let's face it. You got a drummer in the military. The kid's he or she's been playing drums,
right?
His or her whole life.
That's their job, right?
That's it.
The military drummer Pete, is George Parker.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and he was an accomplished drummer who joined the Navy to be a diver, and they pulled him out of the pool, pulled the gear off of him, and said, somebody told me you could read music. And he said, yeah. And they went, all right, here, take this, go to that building. And then he was recruited for the Navy band. And he had a successful 20-year military career as a drummer in the Navy. The thing about your Plimptonian experience is that I made it all the way through high school, concert, and jazz band, and I never learned how to read. And so I'm going to shout out the composer of our Break It Down Show theme song and our what we like to call our band leader, Corey Jacobs, who was the guy who stood next to me who could read everything, and he would kick me just before I had to hit whatever it was I had to hit. In exchange for that, how do I put this? I was the Dr. Phil to his love life.
I was about to say, you found him the ladies.
Yeah. I tried to drag some situations together.
You kicked him when he needed to talk to the girl.
That's true. There we go. He is now a spectacular songwriter, keyboardist, just virtuosic capabilities. But I can absolutely relate to straddling that bass drum and hoping I don't fuck this up. That's in high school band where the stakes are pretty low. And when you get to the point where you're playing in college and everybody has been groomed for that experience in all those chairs except for the one that you're occupying, that does take some huge brass nuts. So, good job there. But the other thing is, when you graduated on the dean's list and you were selected as the student that they wanted to honor in the program the year that you graduated, those people didn't know. And now that your podcast has soared into the stratosphere and this story is out, there are Sac State folks.
I was going to say, there's going to be his biographer is going to make a lot out of this.
Yeah, that's true. And there are the dean, who's likely still the dean up there, is going, that motherfucker.
No, he's going to be proud.
Yeah.
He's going to be rightly proud because he's ours.
Yeah,
he's ours.
Also, I want to point out that I once asked the great Rick Marotta. He talked about how they do the satellite simulcast of the recording of the Academy Awards. The Academy Awards Orchestra is at Capitol Records, and they're recording there, and they're, looking at iPads on FaceTime or whatever of the ceremony that's happening at the Kodak Theater. And I said, man, do you ever do that gig? Can you read that well to do that gig? And he said, I can read well enough to get fired from that gig. and that is the legendary Rick Marotta. So I would say, Cole, you're in good company, and you continue to inspire those of us who love music for the sake of loving music and have the balls to say, fuck it, I'm going to go get that education, even though there's probably some people in line ahead of me.
It happens a lot. You'd be surprised, and it would make you feel a little better about yourself. In a conservatory where I taught for many years, what you get very often are singers who come in, even at the graduate level, who have very minimal musical background, but they have beautiful voices. Yeah. And they graduate as undergraduates, and okay, they've got a degree in this, they've got a degree in that, but they love to sing. And, unlike an instrumentalist who can start at 6 or 7, we don't come into our adult voices until our mid to late teens. Yeah. And so you don't know if you have the real stuff to be a singer, truly.
Yeah. Those pipes aren't there yet. Yeah.
Correct. And
where did you teach at conservatory?
San Francisco Conservatory.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah. No,
did you teach George Duke?
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business, or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show.
No, he was way before.
He was way before you. Okay.
Way before my time.
Yeah.
Although, ask me my Bobby McFerrin story.
Oh.
I'll tell you that in a moment. But back to the point.
Do you know who George Duke is?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Keyboard player.
This is an indicator of the 3 generations that exist at this time.
Yeah, but he's well older than I am.
George Duke is?
He's got to be in his 70s.
Yeah, I guess he passed on about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah, no, I had a lot of wonderful students. But a lot of the voice
he's one of those black guys with great skin, though, so I thought maybe he was in his 30s still.
No, nice try, dude.
I'm a huge fan of George Duke, and I know that he studied at the conservatory, but you're right. He probably escaped out of there in the very early 70s before you even came here.
Yeah. No, but back to the point is a lot of the students, undergraduate and especially graduate in the voice program, came with very minimal musical skills. Now, most singers can only sing in one clef, even if they're educated. They sing in the clef in which their voice is set. And you got to be able to read at the piano. You've got to be able to accompany yourself. I mean, you can't hear the harmonies and stay in tune if you can't at least do that. And it's like pulling teeth out of a hippopotamus sometimes. Getting
Is that easy to do?
Students up, a big pliers.
If you got the right set of pliers.
I was going to say big pneumatic pliers. Yeah. But it's not uncommon to have a master's student in voice having to do tremendous amount of remedial work.
Yeah.
And it puts unfair pressure on them. This is a discussion I used to have with some of the voice faculty. Such and such has such a marvelous voice. This is a potential professional voice. But the person can't read music. We'll find a way. We'll find a way.
It's like knowing a 5th grader who can throw a rock far and going, there's a World Series pitcher.
And the kid is great. The kid's got a beautiful voice and really wants it. But I have to say, a 23 or 24-year-old grad student plopped down among other people who've been doing this since they were 5. Yeah.
And groomed for it.
You can't help but compare yourself to the people around you, and it could be very debilitating emotionally.
Yeah.
And tough. And so I get it.
But as a grown adult straddling that bass drum, Cole was able to look around at his peers and say, I'll shove this mallet up here.
I'm not sure Cole really thought that. This is a very sweet, gentle face. Hold on a second.
Yeah, but he's scrappy too. You don't realize it. He had to get his way through that.
There is a difference, though, in a seasoning. Like a lot of my peers that go to the Army and then come back, they will outwork any 18-year-old because they're like 16-hour days. Shit. That's easy. That's like
Just
what are you-
16?
Are you half day?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like they don't mind putting the work in, and so you had built this legacy like 6 years. Like you knew you were going to keep going to school if you want to, Consumnes River College and then Sac City, and then so you already knew how to go to school.
Yeah.
And a lot of these guys are like, I'm here because this is what's next.
Yeah, the age thing was very telling as my time there went on. I was 100% more dedicated than most of the people there.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I think, just was age. I was coming in here voluntarily. It wasn't like, oh, I just finished high school. What do I do now? Or my parents
Right.
want me to do this thing. It was, I was there because I wanted to be there. And that made a huge difference, which I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. But my experience of going to college later actually was, I thought, perfect for me at least. Because you weren't just trying to get through the classes. You were like, I want to learn and I want to embody these things. And I feel like if I was any younger, I'm glad I didn't go when I was 18 because it wouldn't have been the experience that I would now, revere. So maybe that's what graduate school is for people more.
Besides, when you were 18, you were busy doing other things. And so who would have banged all those chicks and played all those games?
Oh my God.
We should all have been so lucky, John. So 18 years old only looks good in retrospect.
As a fellow appreciator of Dr. Bob's work, one of the reasons why I got into Dr. Bob was I knew I enjoyed opera on the surface, but I wanted a deeper understanding.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to understand, and my dad had a degree in music also, so I wanted to kind of find a way to maybe make us be closer because we never were. So Dr. Bob provided me with that. And took my understanding of what opera was versus musicals and all the other courses in that vein.
You gave greater depth to Pete's relationship with his father.
I know this shit's so humbling to me. Honestly,
it's crazy,
honestly.
right?
Yeah.
But so what I want to ask you is, what did Dr. Bob give you that maybe you didn't have before? I mean, you've been through the courses. I've been through most of the courses myself. But what gifts are left now where you're like, wow, you know what? I really can appreciate Brahms.
You're just embarrassing me more and more now here.
Well,
come on, dude.
He allowed me to act smart in front of bitches. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you not talking? You weren't talking to me. I'm sorry, Cole.
That Martini's kicking in.
Yeah.
No, I think, not to sound overzealous, but literally what I'm doing now would not be possible. Dissect is modeled after your work. So it's what I'm doing for a living, how I'm making money and doing the thing that I love to do would not have been possible. I'm pretty confident in that. Wow. So it's,
What's your franchising fee?
Yeah, right.
I wish. You know what? The fee is just the joy I'm feeling right now.
Oh my gosh, right, yeah.
To tell you the truth.
It's exciting.
You're bringing tears to my eyes, guy. Come on.
Yeah. It's great. Like I said, it's surreal even to be here. And I won't carry on too much because I know I've been in your positions, but that's Dissect changed my life. Your work led to Dissect. So in a way, your work changed my life. So.
And I have to
now
say,
I'm about to cry.
now I'm going to say mine. I worked with a musicologist named Joseph Kerman. I know I've mentioned him in previous shows. Mm-hmm. He was at University of California, Berkeley. Now, I was at Cal as a PhD student in composition, so I was not theoretically working with the musicology department. But I always had a fascination with music history, and I had an ability to lecture to the undergraduates. So the musicologists started using me as their chief teaching assistant in their courses because I could do that. And Joe Kerman was, he passed away a few years ago, the greatest musicologist of his generation. Someone whose writing is as elegant as the music he's writing about. Someone who thought like a composer, and that's the highest compliment. The nicest thing you would say about a cat is it thinks it's a dog. The nicest thing you can say about a musicologist is he thinks he's a composer. And the reason why I say that is because this musicologist is looking at the piece of music and not saying, what kind of underwear was Beethoven wearing that day, or what number pencil was he doing. Why did Beethoven make this choice? Why this pitch? Why these rhythms? Why this structure? What's the message, both musical and expressive? That's how composers think when they write. And that's how Joe Kerman approached looking at music. So not only was he a great scholar, an incredibly beautiful writer, but he thought about the music in the music's terms and didn't superimpose his own worldview over it. Joe Kerman gave me much of what I do now.
Yeah.
And, we all owe somebody.
For sure.
We're all part of a community. We're all part of a panoply of people and ideas that hopefully we distill and use in our own way. But if Joe were here, I'd be sitting here showering him with praise, and he'd be doing his usual Joe thing, flicking his wrist at me.
I say Panoply.
Panoply?
That's what I
Isn't
say.
that a game with like hotels and such?
Pants.
Okay.
It's all the monopolies laid out.
Panopoly.
Yes.
I see. So I got to tell you a story.
Yes.
This is what made my reputation at the conservatory when I started teaching there in the collegiate level. I started teaching there at the extension in like 84.
Your reputation as a super stud?
Yes.
Okay.
This is what made me.
All right.
It was the year I started teaching there, which was 88 in the collegiate program. And I just basically dove down and wrote all these courses during the summer, including the one that turned into the great music course, the music history course, which at the conservatory was called 207-208, a full 2-semester music history course for juniors. And that course was taught on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Well, I guess it was on Wednesday evenings, Bobby McFerrin, who used to live in San Francisco and he used to teach for the extension program, would teach his little dumb, excuse me, Bobby, if you're listening. He would teach his Creativity 101. That's what he called his course.
Okay.
It's a kind of fun with music course. Well, it was maybe my second semester at the conservatory, 208. The course was the first of the day, 9 o'clock in the morning. And that might not sound early to you guys, but you have to understand, every one of those students is also a working musician.
For sure.
So 9 in the morning is freaking way too early because they've been up since 2 gigging. So you see a lot of very snoozy faces, but they were there. Halfway through the class, Bobby suddenly, and it was about 50 kids, largest class in the school, boom, walks into my classroom, pushes the door aside, strides in while I'm talking, my classroom, excuse me, my turf.
Right.
And he says, "Where is it?" "Where is what?" "I left a book. I left an important book here last night for my course. I left it on the piano." And of course there's no book on the piano. "I left it here. Oh my God." He's just ranting and raving, and my students are like, "What?" And I just looked at him, and of course he was about to become very rich and very famous because "Don't Worry, Be Happy" had just come out. And I said, "Bobby, don't worry, be happy." And he said, "I'll talk to you later, Greenberg." And he marched out.
That's hilarious.
And everyone was just going, "Oh!" And that made my reputation. That within half an hour, everyone in the school knew that I had just sassed McFerrin, but big time.
Right.
And that Mr. Rich guy who needed his book, and blah, 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 blah. And that story followed me for about the next 4 or 5 years, and it bought me my rep. Wow. I love it.
That is not only excellent for all of its obvious things, but my favorite thing to do I've physically turned my body away from Cole and Dr. Bob, and I'm pointed square at Pete because he understands this technique. There is no greater intimidation technique than to walk into somebody's place and use their own thing on them to intimidate them. And I'll reference the movie Get Shorty, I think. When Dennis Farina walked into Gene Hackman's office and grabbed the telephone on his desk and hit him in the face with it.
Yeah.
When your ass is getting kicked with your own stuff, there's nothing better than to do that. And that's
Gene
what
Hackman
you did.
deserved it. Because he said, "Look at me." Because he was trying to imitate Chili.
Right.
He was trying to imitate Chili.
Yes. That was so good.
Yeah.
And so that's what you did. You used Bobby McFerrin's own lyric to show him up in the middle of his interruption of your class.
I wanted his ass out of my classroom.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
But you did it with good humor, and you did it with kindness, and he was pissed off at
And
you.
he was
Did he
even
ever
more
come
pissed
back
off.
and say, "Here"?
No.
No.
And you know what? He did make millions on that.
Oh, yeah, he made
For
it
sure.
And the following year, he moved to Minnesota, of all places.
Good
he moved
Christ,
to St. Paul.
Uh-huh.
And that's where he's
Be closer to
as far as
Prince.
I could. Well, could very well be, but that's where he moved. But that was my moment. That was my moment.
Among 1,000 other moments, I'm positive. I'd really like to talk about the fact that of the four of us here, there's one guy who this week really sort of cracked the nut on where to take this medium of dissecting art or literature or whatever everybody's into. I mean, Pete and I, we try to take the person who would be the most interesting person at a cocktail party, and then we apply the techniques that Pete learned in interrogation and that I learned in investigation to pull that person's process apart so we can figure out what it is that made it happen. Cole this week had his Dissect podcast launch on Spotify to great not only acclaim but fanfare, and to a ton of feedback that has come back this week that is all absolutely justified. We talked yesterday. Pete and I went to the Herbst Theater at the San Francisco Opera House to watch.
Oh, that was nice.
It was magnificent to watch a lecture by Dr. Bob where he was accompanied by the great music of Shostakovich. What's Shostakovich's first name?
Dmitri.
Okay. The great music of Dmitri Shostakovich. You gave historical perspective. You talked about his relationship as a Russian to the people around him and to the government of the USSR. Then you had pieces of music that were